Everybody all over the world has heard of the ancient Egyptians and what they built. Their pyramids, temples, the mummies, the pharaohs, especially the boy king Tutankhamun. But who exactly were the people responsible for this great civilization? And what were their origins?
Egypt was one of the most splendid civilizations of the ancient world. The ancient Egyptians were the first to develop writing in Africa. They also established an advanced, centralized political system based on a complex administration. We know a lot about the ancient Egyptians from what they left behind, like this temple in Thebes in modern-day Luxor. But there are also some unanswered questions. For instance, were the ancient Egyptians black? This was one of the most controversial issues in the General History of Africa volumes on which this TV series is based. In this program, we'll be examining the controversy as well as looking at the rise and fall of ancient Egypt.
The story of early Egyptians is inextricably linked to the mighty River Nile. As early as 7000 BC, there's evidence that humans settled along the river in small communities. Along with agriculture on the banks of the river, and just as important for survival, was the raising of cattle, hunting and fishing. At around 3000 BC, North Africa began to dry out, so more people from other parts of the continent converged on this narrow strip of land in the Nile Valley because they needed the water. UNESCO's General History of Africa studies show that the earliest people in the Nile Valley were from an early human population in East Africa who moved north. Though some scholars still believe the Egyptians were right from the beginning made up of people from different regions of Africa who'd then mixed with migrants originally from Western Asia. I wonder how the Egyptians might identify themselves today. Well, to get an idea of this, I go to southern Egypt, where most of the country's historic monuments are situated. I drop by to meet the Suleiman family in the village of Al-Aqab, just outside Aswan.
أهلاً أهلاً وسهلاً ازيك أنت محمود أنا زينب ازيك هو عامل حسابك شكراً جزيلاً.
This is the family compound where they get together to share a meal and catch up. Between mouthfuls of food, I ask them where they believe their identity lies.
فشربات أنت يعني دبت العائلة؟
بيت العيلة احنا ساكنين ورا شوية يعني في البلد فوق.
عندك كم عيال؟
4.
ما شاء الله. أنا برضو عندي 4 ولدين وبنتين.
أنا عندي 3 ولاد وبنت.
ما شاء الله ما شاء الله. Oh good, we're being joined by other members of the family. أهلا وسهلا. شوفكم مرة ثانية. بتفتكروا يعني هي حضارة إفريقية ولا شيء غير إفريقي؟
أفريقية. حضارة أفريقية.
My local guide in Aswan is Fatima Mohammed Subhi. She studied Egyptology, and I ask her if she believes the ancient Egyptians were black.
I believe, yes, they were not white, but black in because they always painted in dark red, not white at all. So this is a color which we have, different colors of black.
Was it an African civilization?
I believe, of course, the kings comes from the south. They were more similar, or looks like me and you. If you go more southern, you are more darker, so it's more African.
Identity is shaped by a sense of shared history and culture, but the explosive issue of race and colour still holds a powerful grip on how many define identity. So what were the ancient Egyptians? Which racial category should we put them in? Well, the late Senegalese professor Cheikh Anta Diop, who contributed to the General History of Africa chapters on Egypt, caused a stir in the 1970s when he stated categorically that the ancient Egyptians were not only African, but were from the Negro race. He placed Egypt firmly in the cultural and genetic context of Africa. He wrote,
"How did the ancient Egyptians see themselves? Into which ethnic category did they put themselves? What did they call themselves? The language and literature left to us by the Egyptians of the pharaonic epoch supply explicit answers to these questions, which the scholars cannot refrain from minimizing, twisting, or interpreting. Egyptians had only one term to designate themselves: Kimpt, the Negroes. This is the strongest term existing in the pharaonic tongue to indicate blackness."
The Senegalese Egyptologist Boubacar Diop, who studied at the Sorbonne in Paris, agrees with Anta Diop. By the way, they're not related. He says there's evidence people migrated from other parts of Africa to Egypt. I meet him in Dakar, where he teaches at the university.
I think Cheikh Anta Diop was right. I am thinking is that ancient Egyptian came from different parts of Africa. One part from the Sahara, one part from East Africa, one part from the Great Lakes. So different African groups for different reasons. The desertification of Sahara, and from the Great Lakes, there were volcano eruption. And from East Africa, also some different groups. The history of ancient Egypt is very interesting. It's the first time, I think, that many groups of Africans came together. And the Nile was very important, gave to the African the possibility to be together. And it was the first African civilization.
That the chapter written by Cheikh Anta Diop stating they were Negroes was disowned by some contributors to the General History of Africa. Dr. Zahi Hawass is a leading Egyptian archaeologist. When asked about the ethnicity of the ancient Egyptians, he describes them as being uniquely Egyptian. So why have the Egyptians not carried out tests on the mummies to verify their ethnicity?
You cannot make any test. There is some studies to see that the shape of the skull looks like African, but still you will never put a final decision about the origin of the ancient Egyptian at all, because you need really to make a very comprehensive study by DNA, and this will take long time.
So how African the ancient Egyptians were still remains a matter of debate for some, even if UNESCO scholars now say the matter is settled and that the pharaohs and their people must be placed firmly within the Black African context. Both halves of Egypt were significant throughout history. Heliopolis and Memphis in the north were big centres, though most surviving monuments are in the south, in Swenet and Thebes, modern-day Aswan and Luxor, deeper inside Africa. For instance, the impressive Temple of Karnak, which later became the spiritual heart of ancient Egypt, was 1,000 kilometres away from the Mediterranean Sea.